There's a simple truth about human nature that, once understood, can change the way we deal with life's most challenging moments. When emotions are high, intelligence is low. This isn't just a catchy phrase, it's a law of the mind. The moment emotions take over, logic takes a back seat. The higher the emotional intensity, the lower our ability to think clearly, make rational decisions, and respond wisely. Have you ever been in a heated argument where you said something you immediately regretted? Or maybe you sent an angry text, only to wish you could unsend it 5 minutes later. That's what happens when emotions cloud judgment. The mind, instead of acting as a tool for reasoning and problem solving, becomes a slave to whatever emotion is running wild at the moment. Think about the last time you were truly angry, blood rushing, heart pounding, breathing heavy. In that state, were you making your best decisions? Were you being your best self? The answer, more often than not, is no. Because in moments of emotional intensity, we aren't thinking, we're reacting. And reactions, especially emotional ones, can cost us dearly. The science behind it. There's a reason why we make poor decisions when emotions take over. And it has everything to do with the way our brain is wired. The human brain consists of multiple parts, but two key players in this discussion are the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for logic, reasoning, and decision-making. It helps us weigh pros and cons, think long-term, and act with intelligence. The amygdala, on the other hand, is the emotional center of the brain. It's what kicks in when we feel threatened, angry, or overwhelmed. Here's the problem. When emotions are high, the amygdala hijacks the brain, overpowering the prefrontal cortex. This is what psychologists call the amygdala hijack. In simple terms, the logical part of your brain shuts down and the emotional part takes control. That's why in moments of anger, we don't pause to consider consequences. We don't ask ourselves, is this the right thing to say, or will I regret this tomorrow? Or will I regret this tomorrow? Instead, we react instantly, emotionally, and often irrationally. The good news? The more we understand this process, the more control we can regain over our emotions. How this plays out in real life? Think about how many relationships have been damaged, sometimes permanently, because of words spoken in anger. A couple fights, and one partner, in a moment of rage, says something they can't take back. I never loved you. You always do this. Maybe we should just break up. At that moment, they might mean it, or they might just be reacting, but the damage is done. The same principle applies in business. Imagine a heated boardroom discussion. One executive, frustrated and overwhelmed, lashes out at a colleague. The words sting, and even after an apology, the damage lingers. The trust is weakened. The working relationship suffers. Or consider financial decisions. How many people have made terrible investments based on fear or greed? When the stock market crashes, people panic, sell their shares, locking in losses that could have been avoided with patience. When emotions dictate financial decisions, rational thinking disappears. The cost of emotional reactions. The cost of letting emotions take control is enormous. It can cost you relationships, opportunities, money, and even your reputation. But the worst part? It can cost you your peace of mind. How many times have you replayed an argument in your head, wishing you had stayed silent? How many times have you regretted sending a message, making a call, or reacting impulsively? That regret, that sense of wishing you had done things differently, is the price we pay for letting emotions overrule intelligence. And here's the tricky part. Emotions don't just affect what we say, they affect how we say it. The tone of voice, the facial expressions, the body language, all of it changes when emotions are in control. That's why two people can say the exact same words, but depending on the emotional state behind them, the meaning can be completely different. Learning to control the emotional storm. If intelligence drops when emotions rise, then the solution is clear. Learn to manage emotions before they manage you. One of the simplest yet most powerful techniques is the pause. When you feel a surge of anger, frustration, or anxiety, do nothing. Don't speak, don't react, just pause. Because in that pause, the amygdala starts to settle and the prefrontal cortex begins to regain control. Think of it like a storm passing through. When the wind is raging and the rain is pouring, visibility is low. But if you just wait, just sit still, the storm passes, the clouds clear, the sky returns to blue, and suddenly, what seemed chaotic just moments ago is now calm. Breathing exercises, mindfulness, and self-awareness are also key. Recognizing when you're triggered and understanding why you're triggered can help you regain control faster. Instead of reacting in the heat of the moment, train yourself to step back, breathe, and respond with intention. Why silence is often the best response. Here's a secret. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. Not every comment deserves a reply. Not every argument needs to be won. Not every battle is worth fighting. When emotions rise, the impulse is to react. But often the wisest thing you can do is stay silent. Let the moment pass and respond later when clarity has returned. Think of great leaders, great negotiators, and great thinkers. They don't rush to speak. They don't let emotions dictate their words. They pause, they assess. They respond with thoughtfulness, not impulse. And that is the true mark of wisdom, learning to control emotions before they control you. One of the greatest lessons in life is learning when to speak and when to stay silent. Sometimes, no matter how much we want to step in, correct, or warn someone, the best thing we can do is let them continue on their path. This is the essence of the principle. Never interrupt a fool in motion. The truth is, not everyone wants advice, and not everyone is ready to receive wisdom, even when it's for their own good. Some people are so determined to make mistakes that no amount of reasoning, warning, or logic will stop them. Instead of wasting energy trying to change their course, it's often best to stand back and let time be the teacher. Because here's the hard reality. Some lessons can't be taught. They must be experienced. The nature of foolishness. A fool, by definition, is someone who refuses to listen, learn, or consider the consequences of their actions. It's not that they lack intelligence, rather, they lack wisdom. They ignore good advice, dismiss experience, and believe they know better, even when all signs point to disaster. Have you ever tried to stop someone from making a bad decision, only to be met with resistance? You warn a friend about a terrible relationship and they get defensive. You advise a colleague against a reckless business decision and they dismiss your concerns. You tell a family member to handle their finances wisely and they scoff at your caution. No matter how much you explain, reason, or even plead, they are determined to do things their way. At some point you realize that arguing with a fool is a losing battle. They won't listen, not because the advice is bad, but because their pride, ego, or ignorance prevents them from accepting it. That's why the wisest course of action is often silence. The cost of interfering. Many people make the mistake of trying to save others from themselves. They think that if they just explain things the right way or with enough passion, they can change someone's mind. But here's what often happens instead. You waste your time and energy. Trying to correct a fool is like arguing with the wind. No matter how strong your case, your words will be ignored. You could be spending that energy on something productive, yet instead, you're engaged in a battle you can't win. You invite unnecessary conflict. Have you ever noticed that fools don't just reject advice, they resent it? The moment you try to intervene, they become defensive. Instead of thanking you for your wisdom, they double down on their mistakes. Instead of learning from experience, they treat you like an enemy. You might get blamed when things go wrong. Here's the ironic part. After ignoring your advice and making a mess of things, the fool might still find a way to blame you. You didn't explain it properly. You didn't try hard enough to stop me. Instead of taking responsibility, they shift the blame onto whoever was closest. This is why seasoned individuals, especially leaders and mentors, understand the power of stepping back. They recognize that some people must fail first, and only then will they be ready to listen. The role of time and consequences. The best teacher in the world is consequences. Nothing educates a fool like reality hitting them in the face. You can warn someone about the dangers of reckless spending, but only when they find themselves drowning in debt do they finally learn. You can tell a person that their toxic relationship is destructive, but only when they suffer heartbreak do they see the truth. Pain, loss, and failure often succeed where words fail. That's why some of the most profound lessons in life don't come from books or mentors, they come from experience. There's an old saying, a wise man learns from the mistakes of others, but a fool only learns from his own. This is why you must be patient. If someone refuses to listen, let them walk their path. Let them feel the weight of their decisions. Let them see the results of their own choices. Because until they experience the consequences firsthand, they will never truly understand. Real-life examples. History and everyday life are filled with examples of people who ignored all warnings and had to learn the hard way. Financial irresponsibility. How many people have been warned about reckless spending, gambling, or bad investments, only to ignore all advice? When they hit rock bottom, only then do they realize the wisdom they once rejected. Toxic relationships. Countless people have been advised to stay away from destructive relationships, yet they continue down the same path, convinced they know better. When the relationship falls apart, they finally see the truth. Business failures. Many entrepreneurs ignore market trends, customer feedback, and industry warnings, believing their ideas will work no matter what. When the business collapses, they are forced to learn what they once dismissed. The pattern is always the same. People don't listen until they have no choice. Why? Watching isn't cruel, it's necessary. Some people might argue that standing back and letting someone fail is cruel. But is it? Or is it the only way they will truly learn? Think about a child learning to walk. If you never let them fall, they will never learn balance. If you constantly pick them up before they stumble, they will never develop strength. The same principle applies to adults. Shielding people from their own mistakes doesn't help them. It weakens them. True wisdom isn't about preventing every mistake. It's about letting people grow through their own experiences. Sometimes, stepping in only delays the lesson. Sometimes, trying to save someone only makes them more resistant. The best thing you can do is let them go. Let them learn. Let them face the results of their choices. Because only then will they be ready to change. In a world where everyone is trying to be heard, where conversations turn into competitions, and where the loudest voice often gets the most attention, it's easy to forget that silence can be more powerful than words. Most people believe that speaking up, arguing their point, or explaining everything in great detail is the key to control, influence, and respect. But those who truly understand human nature know the opposite is often true. Silence speaks louder than words. Silence has a weight, a presence, a power. It makes people uncomfortable, forces them to think, and often reveals more than words ever could. It is the space where decisions are made, where truths come to the surface, and where control is maintained. Whether in business, relationships, negotiations, or even conflict, the person who masters silence holds the real power, the power of silence in conversations. Most people feel the need to fill every gap in a conversation. They fear silence as if it signals weakness, ignorance, or lack of confidence. But in reality, the ability to stay silent is one of the strongest communication tools a person can have. Think about a negotiation. Two people sit at a table, each trying to get the best deal. One side makes an offer. The other person pauses, says nothing, just waits. What happens? The first person starts to get nervous. They start talking again. They lower their price. They add more to the deal. That silence, it just won the negotiation. Silence makes people uneasy. It forces them to reveal their real thoughts, to keep speaking when they should stop. It's why skilled negotiators and leaders use silence to their advantage. The moment you stop talking, you create space for the other person to expose what they might have otherwise kept hidden. When words make things worse, there are times in life when speaking does more harm than good. When emotions are running high, when tempers are flaring, when people are looking for a fight, this is when silence becomes a shield. Have you ever been in an argument where the other person is pushing, provoking, trying to get a reaction? The more you respond, the worse it gets. But when you stay silent, something interesting happens. Their anger has nowhere to go. They start to fumble over their own words. They start to realize they are the only one creating chaos. Silence diffuses conflict better than any argument ever could. Instead of getting tangled in emotional words, silence forces the other person to hear themselves. It reflects their energy back at them, and in many cases, makes them realize how foolish they sound. Silence as a form of control. The one who speaks the least in a conversation is often the one who holds the most power. Why? Because silence creates mystery. It makes people wonder what you're thinking. It makes them seek your approval, your response. Consider a job interview. The candidate answers a question, and the interviewer remains silent. The candidate, feeling the need to fill the gap, keeps talking. In that extra talking, they might reveal doubts, insecurities, or even something they didn't intend to share. Silence forces people to reveal themselves. It draws out truth in ways that direct questioning never could. Those who master the art of staying silent in key moments hold an advantage in every situation, whether in leadership, negotiations, or personal relationships. The role of silence in relationships. In relationships, whether romantic, friendships, or family, silence can communicate more than words ever could. When someone disrespects you, silence sends a message. You don't need to argue, to explain why they were wrong, to demand an apology. The absence of your words, your attention, your engagement, that is the real punishment. It tells them more than any speech ever could. In love, silence can show disappointment, it can show disapproval, it can force the other person to reflect on their actions without a heated argument, and in some cases it is the ultimate test. Because if your silence doesn't make them feel your absence, then your presence never truly mattered to them in the first place. Silence and self-control. One of the hardest things to learn in life is to not respond to everything, to resist the urge to always defend yourself, to explain yourself, to react emotionally. It takes incredible self-control to sit back, stay silent, and let things unfold without interference. When people criticize you, you don't have to answer. When someone spreads rumors about you, you don't have to justify yourself. When someone tries to provoke you, you don't have to react. Silence is the ultimate test of self-discipline. Because here's the truth. Not everything deserves your response. Not every battle is worth fighting. Not every insult requires an answer. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. Why silence is uncomfortable for most people. Most people struggle with silence because they associate it with awkwardness, tension, or weakness. But that discomfort is exactly what makes silence so powerful. Silence creates a vacuum, a space that demands to be filled. And in that space, truths are revealed. People start confessing things they didn't plan to say. They start second-guessing themselves. They start craving a reaction from you. This is why, in high-stakes situations, the person who remains silent the longest is usually the one in control. Silence can be a weapon, a strategy, a message. It can make others nervous, unsure, and eager to break the tension. And the moment they do, that's when they reveal what they were trying to hide. Understanding when to use silence. Not all silence is the same. There is a difference between strategic silence and passive silence. Strategic silence is intentional. It is used in negotiation, leadership, and conflict resolution. It is the kind of silence that forces others to reveal their position, makes them uncomfortable, or gives you an advantage. Passive silence is avoidance. It is when someone refuses to communicate out of fear, neglect, or apathy. This type of silence can be damaging when used in relationships or when a direct response is necessary. Knowing when to stay silent and when to speak is a skill that separates the wise from the foolish. It is what determines whether silence is a tool or a weakness. Mastering this art can change everything: how people perceive you, how much influence you hold, and how much control you maintain in every conversation, every deal, and every conflict. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing that if they explain something well enough, long enough, or passionately enough, others will finally understand. They think that if they just choose the right words, they can convince someone to see reason, to change their ways, to make better choices. But life has a harsh truth. Words are wasted on those who refuse to listen. It doesn't matter how logical, wise, or well-intended your words are. If someone isn't willing to hear them, they are meaningless. Trying to reason with a closed mind is like speaking to a brick wall. No matter how eloquent you are, the words bounce back with no effect. The energy you spend explaining, persuading, and pleading is energy that could be better spent elsewhere. There comes a point when you must recognize that some people don't want to learn, they don't want to grow, they don't want to change, they don't want to hear the truth. And when you find yourself in that situation, the wisest thing you can do is be silent. Why some people refuse to listen. Understanding why people ignore wisdom is key to knowing when to walk away. People reject advice for many reasons, but the most common ones are ego, ignorance, stubbornness, and fear. Ego. Some people think they already know everything. They believe they are right no matter how much evidence proves otherwise. Their pride won't allow them to admit they could be wrong. Ignorance. Some people simply lack the awareness to understand the wisdom being shared. They are trapped in their own limited perspective, unable to see beyond their own experiences. Stubbornness. There are those who refuse to change, not because they don't understand, but because they don't want to. They hold on to bad habits, bad decisions, and bad beliefs, even when they know better. Fear. Some people reject advice because change is terrifying. They would rather stay in their comfort zone, even if it's harmful, than face the unknown. Regardless of the reason, trying to force wisdom onto someone who isn't ready to receive it is like pouring water into a cup that's already full. No matter how much you pour, nothing will be absorbed. The cost of wasting words. Every time you argue with someone who refuses to listen, you are wasting valuable time and energy. Every moment spent explaining yourself to someone who has already decided to ignore you is a moment you will never get back. You drain yourself emotionally. Trying to get through to someone who refuses to hear you is frustrating and exhausting. You repeat yourself, trying different angles, hoping that this time they'll understand. But they never do. You invite unnecessary conflict. People who don't listen often respond with hostility. Instead of considering your words, they argue, attack, and twist your message. The more you speak, the more they push back. You waste time that could be spent on those who do listen. Instead of pouring energy into people who reject wisdom, you could be helping those who are open to learning and growing. When you recognize that someone is unwilling to listen, the best thing you can do is stop talking. The power of unbidden, powerful emotion. Letting people learn the hard way. Sometimes the only way people will ever understand is through experience. You can warn them about the fire, but they won't believe you until they get burned. You can tell them that a road leads to disaster, but they won't believe it until they walk it themselves. This is why wise people know when to step back and let life be the teacher. If someone refuses to listen about financial responsibility, let them struggle with debt. If someone ignores relationship advice, let them experience heartbreak. If someone rejects wisdom about health, let them deal with the consequences. It might sound harsh, but pain is often the only teacher a fool will respect. When words fail, consequences succeed. Some lessons can only be learned through hardship, recognizing when to walk away. How do you know when to stop talking? The signs are always there. They interrupt instead of listening. If someone is only waiting for their turn to talk, they aren't really listening. They get defensive instead of considering your words. If someone reacts with anger or dismissal, they are not open to hearing the truth. They repeat the same mistakes despite being warned. If they keep making the same poor choices, it means they have chosen not to learn. They argue just to argue. Some people love to debate, not to learn, but to feed their ego. If you find yourself in a pointless back and forth, it's time to stop. Once you recognize these patterns, the smartest move is to walk away. Not with frustration, not with resentment, just with the understanding that your energy is better spent elsewhere. Speaking only to those who are ready to listen. Words are precious, wisdom is valuable, but they only matter when given to the right people. If you want to make an impact, focus on those who are willing to listen. Speak to those who seek knowledge. Invest in people who are eager to learn, who ask questions, who reflect on what you say. These are the people who will take your words and turn them into action. A single conversation with someone ready to listen is worth more than 1,000 arguments with someone who won't. That's why the greatest minds in history didn't waste their breath on fools. They shared wisdom with those who were ready, and they let life teach the rest.